Okay, this next spot we have 9-8 suited. There's a min raise, a call, another call, and hero decides to call as well. So in this situation, dealer is a fish, triple sevens is a tag, and Lala is an unknown. And I'm actually cool with hero calling here. And this is a little bit different than the other suited connector hands we've spoken about, because this is a min raise pot, which means two things. One, we're getting a better price pre-flop, and two, it's going to be a smaller pot going into the flop, which means a deeper SPR, which means more playability, which means good stuff for this kind of hand type. Again, suited connectors, suited gappers, small pairs usually need a deeper SPR to perform very well, and thus I'm happier about this. Now, I don't love the fact that we're out of position. That doesn't excite me in the slightest. It's going to make post-flop much more difficult, particularly with draws, but at least in a deeper SPR spot and with a full stack against the fish, I'm much more on board with this. I don't expect to make a tremendous amount of value against the tag, but by the same token, full stack against a fish, min raise pot, I'm going to be okay with this. So we call, flop comes like this, end up flopping the nuts, which is always fun, and hero decides to donk bet. So the donk itself isn't necessarily bad, but I'd always ask myself if this is the best play in this exact situation. And my issue here is this: if I check, what's going to happen? If I check, dealer's probably going to continuation bet a large chunk of the time. Yes, if I bet, he'll still continue with all those hands he would have continuation bet, like the Jack X, 10X, draws, blah blah blah. But I think a fish is more likely to make very bad C-bets, continuation bet with things like pocket 8s, pocket 9s, maybe small pairs, maybe ace kings, ace queens. I think he's more likely to continuation bet with a pretty wide range, and actually a wider range than I think he would give action to my donk bet with. So what happens is if I'm able to check, he bets, I can pinch in extra callers. I can create a situation where I check, dealer decides to bet, and then maybe one or two of those other people call, and now all of a sudden I can go for a big healthy check raise. Whereas if I go for this and dealer really likes his hand, he raises, probably blows out the other two guys. And if I bet and dealer calls, well, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but he probably would have c-bet that same hand, and again, I could have gone for that relative position pinch the callers type situation. So I don't think the donk is necessarily bad, but I don't think it's necessarily best in this situation. Much more likely to consider just checking. But in this situation, I end up getting called by the tag, go heads up to the turn, comes this, and here decides to bet again. So as a default, definitely going to be doing the same. I think the bet size is a little bit on the large side against the tag, but real big part of the range I'm trying to get value from, draws and Jack X. And that's pretty much about it. I don't think a tag will even have much else anyway when he decides to call a min raise preflop and then decides to call our donk bet in a multi-way pop. So in this situation, we actually end up facing a raise and roughly a min raise. And now we have to make some sort of decision. So first thing I would always try to ask myself is, does he have real hands here? Does he have boats? Does he have those kind of hands that beat me? And I'd say he probably doesn't have a ton of them. Reason being is if he had Jack 10, pocket jacks, pocket 10s, or pocket 7s, wouldn't he probably have raised the flop? It's pretty wet, pretty connected. I expect most players are probably going to raise that and try to hit the home run right there. Which means that if he just decides to call our donk bet on the flop, that he probably doesn't have those hands, or at minimum they're at least severely discounted. So I think when he makes this raise, it's really going to be draws. Simply because if he had Jack X, I highly doubt he's going to turn that into a bluff. He'll probably either showdown valet or fold it. I don't really think he's going to turn it into a bluff. So I think his raising range here really becomes like king queen or the double club type hands. So all drawy type hands, and thus hero's call isn't necessarily awful, but I really like coming over the top here. If I come over the top, I'm going to be giving him a pretty good price, like 3-ish to 1. I assume he'll probably make enough mistakes against that and probably make some call mistakes, and thus I'm plenty happy with that. And it also negates the chances that he essentially is able to improve for the cheaper price. So I like going for the shove here. He seems interested. He might make a bad call, feeling pot committed or whatever it is. And I really, again, severely discount that he ever has a boat here. I'm not really worried about the 10, and I don't think he has a lot of 10x either. Simply because what's he going to have 10x with? doubt a tag is going to call the flop with like 10-9 all that much, or Queen 10 or Ace 10 or any of that kind of stuff. So I'm really thinking that this is like, again, draws, straight draws, and flush draws. I would shove and try to get it all in against those kind of hands very comfortably. I don't think calling's necessarily bad, but I'm more apt to call if I think his range is like total air. So I need to call, I need to give him the chance to bluff off on the river, and this just isn't the kind of player who I think that's going to be the case. The tag just isn't going to find himself in the turn looking to get involved in a min-raise bluff war enough of the time in a multi-way pot. So because of that, go for the shove here totally for value. And again, it's just based upon the way that he would probably play the flop. If I thought that he would call the flop with the sets and the two pairs and stuff, that's massively going to change my turn decision, because it massively changes the range that I'm assigning. But in this situation, I would shove. As played, Hero decides to call, goes for the check call and the double board pair. Again, 7 doesn't really change that much, just given the range that I was assigning, and then Hero ends up snapping off against King Queen. So overall, I like the fact that we're hand reading this pretty well. I just think that we could make more value by shoving the turn and maybe getting looked up by the draw a little incorrectly, which is going to be more valuable than possibly calling, letting him improve cheaper. And also the times that he doesn't spew off on the river, that's obviously going to be pretty bad for us if he would have called our turn shove. But otherwise, pre-flop decision is very important. Flop is very important as far as should we donk or should we go for the check. I would probably check this a large chunk of the time and just simply make a decision from there, looking at it more from a relative position type spot. But as played, definitely going to go for the 3-bet shove on the turn, just given the way his range probably contorts after he makes that flop action.